Hey there. So I am still sick, but still gonna try to push a little bit out. Right now, I got my two most favorite world economists, coming up. First one is going to be Professor Richard Wolff. I don't see manufacturing returning to the U.S. And then the second one will be Yanis Varoufakis, and it'll be talking about, is the West in decline? So let's start with Richard Wolff here.
The problem of the United States and its manufacturing sector is much larger than this relationship between the United States and China. It is probably more accurate to say that China has become the scapegoat, the way for the leadership here in the United States to focus the upset of the American people about the loss of manufacturing on one particular country. But that is a strange argument. The decision to move manufacturing industry out of the United States, particularly over the last 30 to 40 years, was made by the corporate leadership of American industry. And one of the places that both U.S. and foreign capitalists moved their manufacturing was to the People's Republic of China. The reasons were very simple. Number one.
So we went from a manufacturing industry or country to a service style based economic country. We should pay our service people more. We should have just taken those manufacturers who had money and were making a paycheck and just turn those paychecks over and say, oh, you now go coach, you now go do some kind of healthcare, you now go train people or something. Or go work at a restaurant, right? Just whatever, service-based stuff. They could bust, they could do all kinds of stuff. But our service-based industries shouldn't be held at a lesser value than manufacturing industries. That doesn't help. If you send, oh well, now we're just going to send good jobs away and only have bad jobs or no jobs, that's not going to work for a society.
The wage level in China was much lower than the wage level in the United States or Western Europe or Japan. And number two, China, with its huge population and its rapid economic growth of the last 30 years, was the world's largest, fastest growing market. The same is true in Vietnam. The same is true in Brazil. The same is true to more or less a degree in many other countries. This is the normal market-driven, profit-maximizing behavior of capitalists. To blame it on China is bizarre. Every president...
Right, again, the right to first refusal. If a boss or a company wants to take a factory and take it somewhere else, the employees of that factory should get the first right to buy it. The right to first refusal is an agreement with the country that if you want to buy the manufacturing, like if the employees want to buy the manufacturing plant that's going to be taken out, the government will basically pay for it, and then the people will have to pay the government back at a decent rate, like slow, easy, because it's still keeping jobs here in America. So you shouldn't just be allowed to just take jobs away without the people working the job being able to have an opportunity to keep the job somehow.
One of the last 10 has campaigned on reviving manufacturing. Bush did it, Clinton did it, Obama did it, Biden did it. They all promise it, and none of them.
So there's enough stuff being manufactured. We don't need any more manufacturing. Even if it's being manufactured somewhere else, just pay our service people. Be a high service economy. Be an ingenuity economy. We need more scientists or something like that. We could get into science and health. Health is one of the service industries, right? It's just, if everything is being produced, then why try to have more people producing stuff?
Has achieved it. So it has become a kind of empty promise of American politics. Republican, Democrat alike. This is what they must say, so they say it. But what they can do is very little because the position is determined by conditions over which American leaders do not have control. They do not control the wages around the world. They do not control the growth of markets around the world. By the way, you can see it also in that many presidents, Republican and Democrat alike, will tell you, over my presidency, we added 6 million manufacturing jobs. Technically, it's true. What it leaves out is you lost 8 million. And that's been the history that we've actually seen. And I would argue further that I don't see much prospect for manufacturing to come back to the United States.
There's really no point.
Even the turn towards economic nationalism that we are seeing in the United States and in other countries, even that is partly a process that will take a long time.
We should manufacture engineers and doctors. We should pay our teachers a whole lot more. And then, like all that Vivek Ramaswamy, we got this weak culture, whatever it was, lazy culture. Let's focus on our kids. Since we don't have any manufacturing jobs right now, let's focus on the youth. Let's make the youth the best they can be and make everybody the best they can be. And just push forward through humanism, man. Like, why do we have to manufacture anything if the stuff is being manufactured? If there was a hole, if there was a lack of certain things, knickknacks or cars being manufactured, fine. But there's not. So it doesn't matter. We should be able to do our service economy.
In order for the United States to once again become a manufacturing economy,
let's dig coal.
It would have to compete with the rest of the world, above all at the level of wages and the benefits workers get in this country. And that's going to take a long time because the wages in the United States are still significantly higher than in most of the rest of the world, less so than in the past. The direction is it, but it'll take time. If Mr. Trump resumes his program from his first period as president, namely to apply high tariffs to Chinese exports to the United States, if he does that, it will, of course, raise prices inside the United States because Americans buying Chinese goods will have to pay the price China charges, plus, in addition, the tariff implied by Washington that goes to Washington, and that means prices will go up. Well, that's not good for the inflation. The United States has a problem with inflation. Mr. Trump campaigned for president on a program of
time is not good for inflation. As long as time keeps going, the prices of everything is going to go up.
Fighting inflation. If he's going to fight inflation, he can't apply tariffs to China. And if he's going to apply tariffs to China, it's going to make the inflation worse, not better. We have no idea how this contradiction is going to be handled at this point. Mr. Trump renegotiated the legal agreements between Canada, Mexico, and the United States. He would tariff against Canada and against Mexico. If Mr. Trump goes ahead with his plans, it will do major damage to Mexico and to Canada. What will be the result? One of the things they're for sure thinking about, and maybe already doing, they're going to revisit their relationship to the People's Republic of China, because they're going to offset the damage done by the United States by becoming closer economically with China, which is not what the United States wants. That's the contradiction of United States policy. Over the last 30 to 40 years, American capitalists have invested huge amounts of money in the People's Republic of China. And they did so with the intention...
And not so much in the United States. I did a video earlier showing where The United States invested $9 trillion since 2005 in blowing up Iraq and Afghanistan. In that same amount of time, China invested the same amount of money in their technology. And how much of that money was invested by these American capitalists going over to China, getting cheaper labor, but upping their technology through China, who is they call it a communist country. They do central planning, or they plan for the future rather than just let money talk and money say what happens. And when it's like that, then you got Elon Musk telling everybody what to do. Donald Trump, you got like 5, 7, 10 people rather than the whole of the people.
And the plan of producing not only for the Chinese market, but for the global market. They are not interested in economic nationalism.
No, they are not.
They are opposed to it. On the other hand, you have those American industries that are threatened by the competition from China. They want the government to be more nationalist to protect them against Chinese, and not just Chinese, but global competition. There is a conflict inside.
Right, it's so weird that the American big-time capitalists want to be protected from competition. Competition is what's supposed to make capitalism thrive.
The United States, which reaches all the way up to the Trump administration and exists in both parties, the Republican and the Democrat,
Both capitalists.
in which there's an ongoing struggle between those who want a good economic relationship with China and those who do not. And that is being fought out every day.
It's stupid to not want a good economic relationship with everybody. Why wouldn't you want to have a good relationship with everybody that you could? I mean, everybody, you can have a good economic relationship with everyone.
Usually not in the public view. Quietly, in conferences, in think tanks, in books and articles written and circulated. And one day, and it may be soon, these will explode into the open, and then everybody will see it.
So that was Dr. Richard Wolff. I've watched hours and hours of his YouTubes. He's a professor at a few different schools, and he's a good guy to watch if you want to learn about economics. So check out Dr. Richard Wolff on YouTube or online. Google him wherever you like to get your information from. I figure since you're here, you probably YouTube some stuff. But he's probably on TikTok and everywhere. So Dr. Richard Wolff, and up next will be Yanis Varoufakis. And now we got a debate from Thinkers Forum. This is going to be Yanis Varoufakis, and he's talking to somebody. I forget the guy's name that he's talking to. I'll try to see if I can find it. But this is a debate. Is the world a battlefield of civilizations? And then let's see what Yanis Varoufakis has to say and his counterpart.
Is the West in decline? Could you lower your hand? Is the West not in decline? Okay, for those of us who aren't in the room, I would say it was about, 10% don't think it's in decline?
I'm used to being in the minority of one. I don't mind.
So Yanis Varoufakis,
if you could control
was my
things,
second
would you want
favorite economist, and probably first favorite economist for a while. I listened to Richard Wolff for a couple years, maybe 4 or 5 actually, and then I started listening to Yanis a little more. He's a little more lively and stuff. Richard Wolff, after a while, I just kind of knew what he was going to say and stuff, so then I moved on to Yanis.
every other nation to become as wealthy as the West? Would you want them to become as democratic as the West? Yanis?
Oh, me?
Why not?
Well, allow me to answer by means of an example, which touches upon something Konstantin said. That, the riffraff out there, outside the West, are dying to come to our shores, and therefore it means that we're civilized and we're better. Well, take the Democratic Republic of Congo. The King of Belgium created a slave colony there for 30 years, then it was taken over by the state of Belgium for 40 years. Then, as they were gaining independence, the CIA murdered their first president. And now today, Glencore, one of our great corporations is mining all sorts of cobalt derivatives and so on, giving zero to the people of the Republic of Congo. I'd like to live in a West which is not a parasite on people that it then denigrates by saying that you are the riffraff and you want to come to a beautiful garden and this is why, you know, and therefore our dream is to stop you from coming, which is your dream.
Okay, no, but in a way...
Right, like take care of the rest of the countries that we get stuff from, and if we didn't just take from countries and help build other countries, say like China on these other videos I've been showing, not as many people would want to come here, and then there would be just more open borders because there'd be less. Every country would be nice. Go ahead,
Is
Yanis.
the ultimate aim, I mean, if you could do it, that yes, you don't have whatever the mining companies doing whatever they do in other nations, but those nations build up. I'm just wondering if the dream is a multipolar world.
Yes.
Very
Yes.
briefly, the dream is to have cooperation, solidarity, and genuine development of everyone that lives on this planet.
The multipolar world is an atrocious idea.
Konstantin Kisin, Sunday Times best-selling author. I've seen this guy a few times in the past couple of weeks. He's kind of new to me, so let's see what he has to say.
Genuine development of everyone that lives on this planet.
The multipolar world is an atrocious idea whose consequences will be exactly the consequences we have when you see a multipolar world within one country. That country is Mexico. Mexico is controlled by a large number of cartels. And when one of them is taken out, what ensues is a chaotic fight for dominance again. And the multipolar world will lead to conflagration, inevitably, because somebody has...
Not now. We have too much connectivity, too much technology, and we have too much ability to destroy the entire planet. If we were to fight China, Russia, and Iran, and everybody... some South American countries, if everybody was to fight, you only need about 4 or 5 nukes, maybe even less, strategically placed around the world, and we're all going to die.
to be on top. It's unavoidable. And
but saying that we're all going to die is we wouldn't do it because we know we're all going to die. So just to where we're at now, I really don't think that a multipolar world is just going to lead to the whole world's going to be like Mexico.
Cartels. And when one of them is taken out, what ensues is a chaotic fight for dominance again. And the multipolar world will lead to conflagration, inevitably, because somebody has to be on top. It's unavoidable. And
somebody has to be on top.
Of course. You know, Yanis's point about cooperation is entirely wonderful, but the best way to predict human behavior is to look
And I don't think it's necessarily true that somebody has to be on top.
at human behavior in the past. When is this great age in which everyone just sat together?
So that is a good argument to bring back slavery, because almost every
since
society
we're on the
until
subject of
200 years
slavery,
ago
let me just
had slavery.
May I address what Yanis has said repeatedly? Actually, I think it's important to do so. What he said on stage during his presentation is entirely true, which is that many of the riches of Western societies are the product of the resources that were taken from other parts of the world. What I'm afraid this analysis is missing is the fact that during that time, as during the present time, the entire world was competing on that very same model. The only...
That's not necessarily true. China was living on a way different model. They weren't imperialists and they weren't going out and going to other countries trying to take their stuff. And I would say South America and North America, they might have, Indians fought each other, nice, whatever, Native Americans, fine. But they weren't going out imperialism-wise, trying to go to other countries and take over the entire world.
The reason that the European powers were able to be as effective as they were,
because they were the most savage and most ruthless people. Like, I saw this thing where a Native American, I don't know if it's true or not, but, it said, like one of the kids was talking to the elder Native American and saying, how are we gonna defeat these white people? How are we gonna save our villages? How are we gonna save our land? And the elder Native American looks at the younger one and he says, we're not. And the younger one says, "How can you say that?" And he said, "These guys are such savages. There's nothing that they won't do to kill us. Like, they're going to beat us. There's no way, because they have morals, they have soul, right? Like, to come and just devastate everything and think that human beings aren't human beings and be able to do what the West has done to Native Americans, black people, and basically the world. It's like it takes a special people, like savagery-wise, to be able to do this.
Is that they had superior technology.
And it does help that they had superior technology, but you have China, who had superior technology a long time ago, and the superior technology that the West really had was gunpowder, right? China had gunpowder for a long time. They used it for mountains, fireworks, all kinds of cool stuff, and maybe they shot off at each other a bit, but they didn't decide to go and take over the entire world. When the West found some gunpowder, I'm not exactly sure when we got it, but I know China's had it for a couple thousand years from what I don't know, but that's what I've read, I'm pretty sure. But for us to have gunpowder, we had it for like 10 days and started shooting everybody that didn't look like us. It's just, so it's not just the technology, it's just the lack of care of other people, right? Like black people are people. They walk on 2 feet, they speak, right? You have sex with them and you breed with them. Same with Native Americans. But to have the ability just to kill people like that is just at another level.
And superior technology. May I finish my...
There you go.
May I
Yanis,
finish?
1 second.
And there it is, right? So China had far more superior technology, but weren't imperialists. They didn't have the savagery to want to go around and kill everybody that doesn't look like them.
I will come to you to respond, but let's let Constant make the point.
Factually correct.
We've got an hour and 40.
Let's
You
be
go.
factually
It's only Europe that set out to
Yanis.
destroy and to
Yanis,
Let
we've
you
only
finish.
just started. Constantine.
It's too. I'm also slightly Greek, so this is Greek on Greek violence here.
Get them.
Get to the point, because otherwise...
Well, I'm afraid I'm going to need a little time to get to the point, especially if I'm interrupted. So, every other civilization in human history has practiced slavery in one form or...
And then you can't say that. You've never seen every civilization in human history. Most. Say most. But there's probably a few that didn't practice slavery.
another. Every other civilization, including the Native Americans, who were enslaving each other and anyone they could find, the Middle Eastern Arab slave trade across the Saharan desert was worse and lasted longer than the transatlantic slave trade. And every other great empire in history attempted to practice slavery to the very best of its ability.
So every other empire is gone. You don't go at the Roman Empire and be like, oh, give us reparations because we were slaves, because it's not there anymore. Like, Rome isn't the same as the Roman Empire. The West and the British Empire, the U.S. capitalist slavery peoples, this thing is still here. The United States, who was built on slavery and free labor and taken from the Native Americans who are still here, the United States is still here right now. So they need to do something. We need to do something to make amends. But countries like Genghis Khan, oh, he raped half the world. Sure he did, but what are you going to do about it now? He is all the way gone. His country or whatever, his dynasty is gone. You can't do nothing with that.
To do the very thing that Yanis rightly accuses Western powers of doing. Now, the reason the West was more successful at this is it was more technologically advanced and was able to transport people across oceans in a way.
But again, they were more technologically advanced, but it was mostly gunpowder, which China was more technologically advanced than us for a long time and had gunpowder way before we did, but didn't have the savagery that the West had.
The very best of its ability to do the very thing that Yanis rightly accuses Western powers of doing. Now, the reason the West was more successful at this is it was more technologically advanced and was able to transport people across oceans in a way that at that time no other civilization could. So yes, it is true that the Western history is one of colonialism and enslavement, but that is only because we were better at it than other people. That's the only reason that we are where we are.
So that we were better at being bad than other people, that that's the excuse to not care? That's crazy.
I will come to you in a minute, but just to go back to the specific question.
Yes.
Should we be aiming towards a multipolar world? You would say, look, we're a competitive world. Let's just compete against everyone else.
See, a multipolar world, I think we should be a more cooperative world than a competitive world.
I would say that the best world is a stable one, and the construction we have had for some time now has been one of the best periods in human history since the end of World War II. Now, why has
the best world is a stable world? From the Western standpoint, Western countries are fairly stable. The U.S. Navy, Europe, but now you see the homelessness in the U.S. and Europe. I don't know if you want to call that totally stable, but what the West does with the rest of the world, we still go around with our imperialist ways, cooing people, imposing tariffs on people, hurting other countries. So
the West.
Let me see, what was he saying?
I would say that the best world is a stable one, and the construction we have had for some time.
So to keep the world stable, why are we trying to fight with China and Russia, the two biggest, and Iran, three of the biggest countries or populations in the world? It doesn't make any sense. And then we go around destabilizing the world. And he's saying that he likes it, the capitalism, the Western, whatever, because it's the most stable world. It is absolutely not. This guy is totally off. It is absolutely not. We are the most unstable that we could possibly be. If we were more like China and going around the world building infrastructure, if we would have spent that $9 trillion that we spent blowing up Iraq and Afghanistan, if we would have just handed them the money, the world would be a much greater place. If we would have helped build infrastructure, it would have been a better place. Probably just handing them the money that we dropped bombs on them of would have been the best thing that we could have done.
And now has been one of the best periods in human history since the end.
Since the end of World War II, one of the best periods in human history. So Russia, I don't know, I think it was in the teens, so it was before World War II. They brought more people out of poverty than anybody had in a faster time than anybody before. Then China, I think it was in the 50s or 60s, beat Russia's thing. They brought more people out of poverty than anybody had before, beating Russia's record or whatever. It wasn't the West doing this. It was not capitalism doing this. We starve people. If you ain't got money, you don't eat.
End of World War II. Now, why has that been
the West?
Well, I would argue for the billions of people around the world who've been lifted out of poverty during the same time.
But is that the West? We put tariffs. We have, what do you call it? When you can't, we have patents. We have tariffs. We don't trade with people. We hold our technology from people. We charge people for, what do you call that, for diabetics? Penicillin. The guy sold it for $1 so people could have it. And now people are dying for not being able to get penicillin. So those are minds that we're not being able to use or that aren't being able to be putting their thoughts out on any subject. Once they die, they're gone. We don't get to have their influence. And this is from Western culture. Western culture says, oh, you ain't got the greenbacks. Fine, you can die. Other cultures put people first, and sometimes when you put people first, yes, some people will die and bad stuff will happen because you gotta try to organize. But if you look around in the capitalist society, people die all the time. We kill people. It took slavery to build this society.
Time, in addition to for the West. Now, is that maintainable? Well, that's, I think, the issue that we're in discussions about. I don't know if that's maintainable, but my argument, the argument I made, and the reason that we're having this debate about slavery, is that I consider Western values, I don't think we should bomb them into the people of Iraq and Afghanistan, as some of our leaders have been attempting to do.
That's Western values.
But they are the best values, at least for those of us who want to live in the West, and we should maintain them as much as we possibly can. And then other people may wish to buy into that worldview as well. No one suggests that the United States or the values of Western Europe are perfect. I would not suggest that even to this day, all people in America are treated equally, whether that's on sex or race or whatever line. But which country has made more progress? We talk endlessly in the West about racism. Okay, what other great civilizations in the world are better at race relations than we are? Is it Russia? When I was last in Russia, there was a song playing on the metro which was, "They killed a Negro, la 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 la, he can't play basketball anymore." In China, one of the most popular commercials on TV was a Chinese girl who was approached by a black man.
I think I put that on the channel earlier.
She pours him off and shoves him into a washing machine. She puts the product that is being advertised into the washing machine. And what's the payoff? He comes out Chinese. Where is this great world to which we are comparing ourselves to? You cannot compare our civilization to utopia. You have to compare it to reality. And in reality, we are the best civilization in existence today. And that is why we must maintain our dominance around the world.
And no one seems to be arguing with that.
So we are the best civilization today, but so we don't need to get better. Our race relations are terrible, but we don't need to get better. That doesn't make any sense. Just, you can say that they're worse around the world, and I've seen all kinds of things where, well, one, China goes straight up into Africa and helps build Africa, brings Africans to China to come to colleges and get educated. Some stay, some go back to Africa. There are Chinese people that are like building the structures in Africa, and then they stay to run it, and then they marry African people and have mixed children, and then the children are half African and half Chinese. Yes, there is racism everywhere. That's just part of people being stupid. But to say that America's the best on race relations, I knew this dude from the Dominican Republic, and he told me that I don't know if it was in the 1800s or early 1900s, that they had a thing, and they had a name for it, like some Spanish name. I don't even know. I forget. But he said that they encouraged darker people and lighter people to marry each other, and that if you were like considered a black and married a white and vice versa, your kids would get to go to college for free and have certain different things that if you were all black or all white, those kids wouldn't get to have, because they wanted to get rid of the racism.
Are we good enough?
I don't agree with that at all.
So I would just kind of say that's kind of a better outlook than the American outlook. Like, we are not the best on race in the world, for sure.
Okay.
Lots of people are arguing.
We'll come back to that. But are we good enough? I just want to...
We're never going to be good enough. Are you good enough? Am I good enough as a human being? Have I worked out the right...
Good enough? You can be good enough and always get better. Like, are you perfect? No. Are you good enough? Like, is your wife good enough? If your wife isn't good enough, then you're going to divorce her, right? If you're a woman and your husband isn't good enough, you're going to divorce him. If your kids aren't good enough, you don't really divorce your kids. I'm not exactly sure what you would do to your kids, but what, you're going to whoop them and stuff? Like, you're going to just start beating them because they're not good enough. Is different than perfect. Like, are you good enough?
We'll come back to that. But are we good enough? I just want to...
We're never going to be good enough. Are you good enough? Am I good enough as a human being? Have I worked out the right way to treat my wife or my son so that I could say, I no longer need...
He almost said perfection, and then he caught himself because he knows he's... See, that's... Are you good enough? Almost everybody should be good enough, right? You're good enough, but you still want to improve. Are you perfect? No. But are you good enough of a brother or sister? Are you good enough of a parent? Hopefully. Are you perfect? Nobody's perfect.
We're never going to be good enough. Are you good enough? Am I good enough as a human being? Have I worked out the right way to treat my wife or my son so that I could say, I no longer need to improve. I am this perfect person.
Okay.
Is there any human being in the world who's not a psychopath who can make that claim?
So she didn't ask him if he was perfect. She asked him if he was good enough. Now, if you're not good enough, if you can never be good enough, good enough for what? Are you good enough for perfection? No, ain't nobody good enough for perfection. But she didn't necessarily say perfection. She just said, "Are you good enough?" Or like, can some? Or is America good enough? No, America's not good enough. But now, let's say America gave reparations to all the ADOS, the American descendants of slaves. Say we upped our minimum wage to $20, $30. Say we did a universal health care, universal pre-K. We got rid of all the homelessness. All the homeless got houses. Everybody was fed. Everybody got education. Right? There's a lot of stuff that we could do, right? And say we did all these things, all those things, right? Would that be good enough? Probably. That's good enough. Is it perfect? No. Could we improve? Yeah. Right? So you can be good enough without being perfect. There's two different things, and he's trying to conflate the two and like try to kill her argument, or like try to say, oh, America's what it is, so whatever. Now, we're not good enough yet. We haven't got past our sins and whatnot. Do we need to be perfect? No. Do we need to be good enough? We should be.
No. So why should we expect our civilization to be perfect? We
She didn't
should
say
only
that.
expect it to be as perfect as it possibly can be. And
But see, that's when the right does that, right? They put words in your mouth. They'll say stuff that you didn't say. She didn't say perfect. She did not say that whatsoever. And so he's going to fight or argue an argument that she didn't bring up.
better than others.
I hope that she notices this and says something.
That's all that there is. Only comparison and nothing else. And if you're comparing us to the land of milk and honey, you are dangerous.
And most people say that Sweden is better than us. Most people say that the Scandinavian countries are better than us. So we're not the best.
Okay, but I would agree there's a third thing. It's not just accepting that we're not perfect and that we're better than others, but actually actively working to improve
Absolutely.
the internal, which I'm not hearing you advocate for.
Well,
and
you
I think
haven't
that's
asked me
one of
about it.
the
I'm very
challenges.
happy to advocate it. We had this discussion very briefly. We had this discussion over dinner last night about diversity and inclusion and all of these programs which are intended to bring people into the thing. And I say to all of that,
She said improve, nothing about diversity and inclusion, but I guess if that's improvement to him, okay, let's go with it.
But actually actively working to improve
Absolutely.
the internal, which I'm not hearing you advocate for.
well,
and I
you
think
haven't
that's
asked me
one of
about it.
the
I'm very
challenges.
happy to advocate it. We had this discussion very briefly. We had this discussion over dinner last night about diversity and inclusion and all of these programs which are intended to bring people into the thing. And I say to all of that, the right objective, difficult as it is to achieve in any society, is that there should be zero discrimination. Zero discrimination against people. And what we have today in the modern West is a new framework of discrimination. We have decided that it is okay to discriminate against white people. It's okay to discriminate. Oh, you laugh.
So
Well, let
silly.
me give you some statistics. Fantastic, I enjoy
Well,
that.
before you give us some
No, let
statistics.
me give
No.
some statistics.
You can come back in
If
a
you
minute.
are Jewish or Asian or white, it is much harder for you to get into an American university because all of those groups
That is by far one of the dumbest things I've ever heard. If you are Jewish, Asian, or white, it's harder for you to get into an American university.
widely discriminated against in that society.
That's simply untrue.
That is factually
That is
correct.
simply untrue.
For
Go
the
to
same
Harvard. Go to
for the
Yale.
same SAT
Go to
score,
Princeton.
you are much
Go
less
to
likely to get in.
Stanford. Go
the
to Wall
BBC.
Street.
So that would mean that black people are represented at 13% of whatever college. You go to every college and you have 10 to say 16% of black people at pretty much every college. I don't know the percentage of other people, but then you would have other people represented at their percent, right? And mostly when you would have a group, say Asians or Indians or whatever smart groups come in, Nigerians are considered smart, right? So whatever the smart groups come in and say overrepresent themselves for the college, what they would normally take from would be the bottom percent of the white people. So if you really did it, and that's why I say 10 to 13% of black people, right? If we're at 13%, 10 is kind of close, right? And then we'd overrepresent at 16% sometimes. But if white people are the vast majority of people, then if you're 80% of people, or say 70%, I'm not exactly sure what it is right now. It might even be in the 60s. But whatever it is, if you're represented at much higher than that, then white people aren't known as the smarter people like Asians or whatever, but that you shouldn't be represented at, say, more than, say, a couple of percent, like, say, 2% higher, 5% higher, whatever. If you're 80% or 60% of the population, when the Asians or the Indians or whoever, the Nigerian, whoever cuts in and comes in at a higher population, you're going to take more from the higher population just because they're the higher population. They have more to take from, right? So if you go from 13% as the black people down to 10%, that's a higher percentage than if you were at, say, even 66% as white people, and then you go down to 63%. That 3% doesn't represent the same thing. 13 going into 66 would be like 5-ish. So it would be 15%, and that would be what you would see the drop in. But that you just see mostly black people being underrepresented, it shows that there is a racism. And to sit here and try to say that white people, Asian people don't get into colleges, Jewish people, it's quite insane.
The BBC has whole realms of jobs that are not available to white people. There are internships that prohibit white people from applying.
So there was 450 years at least, that there were only jobs for white people. And even that, just for white men. So you gotta kind of, when something is way off, when you've been doing something so skewed for so long, you got to kind of bring it back into reality or back into relation, right? Like, you got to try to get black people up to 13%. You got to try to get other people up to whatever their percentage is.
I don't regard myself as white. I'm a first generation Russian, Ukrainian, Greek, Jewish immigrant. I hate this stuff, and I hate it because it unfairly privileges people who do not deserve the privilege. What we should be doing is eliminating discrimination, not introducing new types of discrimination.
I'd like to make a couple of points. One concerns this.
Well, one, undoing old discrimination is going to look like discrimination, because if you're discriminating and then you go against discrimination and stuff, you got to point out the white, black, the Chinese, or whatever it is. You can't just be like, oh, we're going to... Well, I guess you don't have to point it out, but it's still going to have the same effect.
As an educator, many a time, in a class, there would be young people who, because of their disadvantaged background, needed more of my attention. Okay? Because of their disadvantaged background, they didn't have the same tools that other kids did. Now, I gave them more attention, which meant, because it's a zero-sum game, there are a fixed number of hours every day, that attention, extra attention, I didn't give to other kids that were advantaged or coming from the advantage. To call this discrimination, because I didn't make my time available equally to everyone, is to miss out on the fact that in order to bring about meritocracy...
I think Yanis kind of explained it a little better than I did, but that's what I'm talking about.
In order to bring out...
But again, I'm saying... I've always said in other videos that we should have universal pre-K. We should have the best schools in the world here. And I think the entire world should just all have the best schools. All kids deserve. But right now we're in the U.S. and we're supposed to be the best country of all time ever, the richest country that's ever even been thought of. Every kid in our country should have an A+ education. That should be our number one goal for almost everything.
Out the talents of the disadvantaged kids, and of course, disadvantage is highly correlated with gender, with races, with race, with ethnic background. To call this discriminatory.
And economic background. I'm surprised you left out economic background.
In the pursuit of meritocracy is essentially to fly in the face of the facts. The second point I wanted to make...
But very briefly, I did not...
Okay, you can come.
I did not call that discrimination. I was talking about admission.
No, when I was talking about in universities that we are going to take people from a...
See, that's what the guy Tom did from the PBD podcast too. You go straight to universities when the kids don't have the same opportunities. You know that poor kids, black kids, don't have the same opportunities as rich kids and most white kids. Yes, there are some underprivileged white kids, and there's a higher number of underprivileged white kids than there are black kids, but there's just a higher number of white people. There's a lower percentage of white kids than black kids. Black kids are overrepresented by percentage. But the thing is, if you don't look at it at the beginning and start with pre-K, start with even food, like you got to develop the brain, the body, and all that, right? So kids deserve food. This should be a right for every child to have the nutrients and the calories and whatever the CDC or whoever FDA says that a child needs to have to be grown at a healthy rate. That should be law. That should be a right for every child, because a child didn't ask to be here, and a child is a child. They can't work. That's what a government should do, is take care of the least of us all. And a child, a baby, is the very weakest, right? But you can't, if you just start at colleges and say, oh, well, these people aren't qualified, and these people aren't qualified for a reason. It's done on purpose, and you're not going upstream far enough, Tom.
Working class,
I was
and
talking
therefore,
about admissions.
Okay,
Admissions.
but I need to make the second point, because I think it's a question. It touches upon. It speaks to perhaps the deepest difference between Constantine and I. We have one commonality. We both grew up in a dictatorship, but a very different kind of dictatorship. He grew up in the Soviet Union. I grew up in a Greek fascist dictatorship under NATO. And I'm saying this because you have a tendency to think in terms of us, the West, versus them. And them being the East, being the uncivilized Chinese, or the homicidal Russians, or the Africans, or who are trying to come to our shores. Because of my background, I have a very different tendency. You see, we were in Greece, when I was growing up, part of the West. We were part of the Council of Europe. We were part of NATO. And yet, the secret police broke down our door and abducted my father, and we lived in terror of a fascist dictatorship. So I know how to not see the world in us versus them. I can see,
Yeah, see, the fascist dictatorship broke down his door. Here, they broke down Fred Hampton's door. They broke down all of Tulsa, Oklahoma. Here, they do it too in the U.S., or we do it too, however you want to call it.
Interestingly, my father, the same father, when the dictatorship fell, instructed me in no uncertain terms that I should study in Britain so that I wouldn't have to face the secret police. So I can relate to the importance and cherish the importance of Western values, while at the same time recognizing the dialectical relationship. It is the terror that the West has unleashed on so many other societies that has created existentialist threats for the United States, for us. So let us, just for a moment, consider the possibility that this us versus them, the West versus the rest, is the root problem which essentially condemns the West to the decline of the values, which may end up with a bang, not a whimper.
The official online year-end promotion of
the prospect of humanity depends on not going down Constantine's way of maintaining a unipolar world. A unipolar world is toxic.
Very.
It is quick marching us to extinction for 2 reasons.
So just in case you don't understand, a unipolar world means that one country or one idea is running the world, say either America or the West. A multipolar world would be multiple. I guess it'd be more than two, because I guess you would call it a bipolar if it was just two, and a multipolar if it was more than two, right? So more people having more say throughout the world would be a multipolar world. A unipolar world is what we have right now, where the U.S. or the West kind of puts their thumb on everything, but now you got BRICS, China and Russia, them trying to come up and make it more of a multipolar world.
Reasons. One I mentioned already, but I'll mention it once more because we didn't discuss it sufficiently. I kept bringing it back, but it was disappearing. One is, of course, climate emergency, the climate disaster. Without a genuinely multipolar, democratic humanity, where the Indians are represented, the Chinese are represented, the Africans are represented, the Europeans are represented.
What kind of? You must to represent everybody?
No way we're going to survive on this planet. Donald Trump, Konstantin was arguing in favor of a unipolar West. Well, there's no such thing as Britain, even if they have a place in the Security Council. It is the United States. And you have a president who doesn't believe in climate change. He thinks it's hocus pocus. So, it is clear to me, I don't need to elaborate the point, that humanity's future depends on a multipolar world in which there is more proportionality between numbers, prospects, and power. The second point, Konstantin, and I'm referring to you because this has been the tussle tonight, and I've very much enjoyed it, and thank you so much for providing me with incredible joy.
I like debates like this too.
He's speaking after you, and you're not interrupting.
I remember in 2001 demonstrating outside Russia's embassy in London against Putin. And I remember a month later, I was in the Senate of the University of Athens, and I was the only one, again, I was in the minority of one. The proposal that had come to the Senate was the proposal to award a certain Vladimir Putin an honorary doctorate, and I was the only one who voted against, and I explained my negative vote by saying that he's a war criminal because of what he did, effectively killed 250,000 people in Chechnya just in order to solidify his regime. And what was the reaction of the British police outside the Russian embassy and of the West? They treated us, who were opposing Putin, as the enemies of the people, as the enemies of the West. That is the West for you. In a sense, Putin would not have existed if it wasn't for the massive diminution of the life prospects of Russians for which the United States was chiefly responsible through the IMF in 1993, 1994. There was a government back then, corrupt, incompetent and so on, but they just wanted to become part of the West in Russia. And, the crushing of the prospects of the Russian people was the result of the West. This is why I'm saying, stop thinking in terms of the good West, the bad East. We are the ones, because we have such exorbitant power, that we are creating malignancies in Russia, in China, in Syria, in Israel, through our nasty and rather short-sighted policies.
Right, and I agree with what Yanis said mostly right there. We need to be more cooperative, we need to be more helpful, less destructive. And then if we can't do that, at least not do anything, right? There's so many people that hurt the world, right? Like Elon Musk, Donald Trump, just don't do nothing. Just go away. If they just went away, if the worst people you could think about just went away, that'd be better, right? We could help the world, but if we just did nothing, if we just did absolutely nothing as America, stop cooing people, stop bombing people, stop spending so much money on military destruction on our planet, the world would be a better place. We need to stop that. If we can't be helpful, at least not do anything. But if we can be helpful, if we can be a multipolar world and be a cog in the machine, that would be fantastic. I want to do that. But, our leaders are nuts. So, there you have it. Just, going over some different things that not everybody kind of looks at. How I like to stay checking it out across the spectrum.